Today's guest has lived rugby at every angle in South Wales. Mark Evans played at Cross College Brecon before studying at Cambridge. 80 first-team appearances for Saracens in the 1980s as a hooker, making his debut against London Irish in 1981 before moving into coaching by his mid-20s. He took Saracens into the professional era, citing the 1998 Saracens team as one of the greatest professional teams of Saracens he coached, and maybe even Harlequins. He left Saracens at the end of 1999-2000 season to be CEO of Harlequins. As the CEO of Quins, he oversaw stadium redevelopment, academy investment, and the tough times of relegation and rebuilding. He's since worked across codes and continents, from Premiership Rugby to rugby in Australia with Western Force and Melbourne Storm. Today, he's the CEO of the Fijian Drua, one of the most exciting projects in the Super Rugby Pacific. From grassroots to governance, Evans has seen the sport at every level, and he's developed hard-won lessons on leadership, resilience, and building systems at last. Mark Evans, welcome to the Business End.
Hi guys, how you doing?
Very well. Welcome, Mark.
Yeah,
Good.
And I was pleased to see your debut game was against London Irish. By the way,
Yes, the Sunday Times. I still remember this because I never had one ambition, was to play one game.
Yeah,
That wasn't very good. I really wasn't. I'm not being modest. I'm not being falsely modest. I was very limited, but I tried hard. And my ambition was to play one first class game. And I think the Sunday Times called us a hard pressed Saracens front row, and I think that was fair comment, actually.
Yeah, they're pretty good in those days.
They were pretty sharp around that time. Yeah, they were.
Yeah, and we were interested to read as well that one of the reasons why you went into coaching is because John McFarland was in the Saracens team, who me and Fitzy know very well as a London Irish hooker and coach as well.
It was one of those, you tell young people today, they don't believe you. It was one of those, well, this is how it used to happen. You guys are probably too young. I want to remember, you used to jack up pre-season in the summer, and nobody quite knew who was coming, who was leaving, who was joining. And you all used to look around and think, well, who's in my position? And that summer, this guy, I'd heard about him, turned up, 5-6 years younger than me. And he was bigger than me. And he's not very big, but I was tiny. And he was quicker than me. And I thought, well, yeah, but I'm a really good technician. And then I saw him throw a ball in a line. I thought, right, I'm going to retire. I had absolutely no interest in going down. I'd worked really hard to get up the grades. I had no interest in going back down. Well, no, I think I've had a good run. I think I'll go into coaching.
Yeah. Great guy as well, John McFarland.
Yeah, super fella.
Yeah, good fella. I had a really storied coaching career as well.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Very much so. Yeah. Very talented. So let's get into it, Mark. You grew up in South Wales, you played at Saracens, you moved into coaching early and then repositioned as a highly regarded CEO. What was in your DNA that drove you to become an elite coach and a business leader?
Nothing drove me. I never thought I'd be a full-time coach, ever. And once I was, I didn't think I'd ever go on and sort of do other stuff. I thought I'd be a coach. But things happen, don't they? And I mean, I got into it because a couple of people were very influential on the coaching bit, which then morphed into something else. But I knew I wasn't that good a player, but I loved it. And I worked really hard for the time. I can remember in the mid 80s, and I was, as I say, I played at about 80 kilos, maybe at a push. And I used to go weight training. This is 1985, 86 now. Nobody weight trained. Isn't it amazing to think that?
Yeah.
I mean, literally, I came back one summer and I put on a bit of muscle mass, upper body stuff. And you walked in the change room, the people, what have you been doing? Myself, you've been down the gym, sort of. I think it might be helpful. Honestly, I'm not making that up.
No.
And I remember, and it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, I remember, roll it on 10 years or so, and Francois Pienaar had arrived at Saracens, and I remember chatting with him. He said, I've never done any weights. I've done it all on body weight. And this was 3 years after he'd won a World Cup and the Mandela final and all the rest of it. So I just loved the game. My dad loved all sport, and he was from the Western Valleys in Wales, and he would have been, back in the day, he'd have been a really good player, but You left school at 16, you went to work, and, it just wasn't a thing. Left Wales, went to work in England, in Worcester and all the rest of it. And so he was very influential. I grew up in Cardiff, when at one of Wales's golden eras, sort of late 60s, early 70s, Barry and Phil and Gerald and JPR and Mervyn, and stood on the North Enclosure. Used to go to Cardiff Rugby every week and Cardiff City the other weeks with my dad. So I was a very sports-oriented kid. Went to my primary school was right in the middle of Cardiff, right in the city centre, and we played in the Cardiff and District Leagues, from a very young age. And then I went to Lady Mary High School with people like Adrian Hadley and Mark Ring and all those. And we're one of the big Catholic high schools in the city, which was a big state rugby school. And then I went to Christ College, mainly because I don't know when my mum and dad wanted me to go there, and I didn't want to go. And then they showed me all these sports pitches, and I was a cricketer, really, not a rugby player. And they showed me all these sports pitches. I thought, yeah, I'll go. That was it. They just showed me the pictures. I said, no, I want to stay with my mates. And then they showed me all these cricket and rugby pitches. I thought, well, you want me to go there? Yeah, all right, fine, I'll go there. Great. And then I went to Bristol, and Bob Reeves, who's still around. I trained as a teacher. I did economics at Cambridge, and everybody else went into the city. I've always been a little bit of a contrarian, and I wanted to change the world, and I was quite political, and I still am. And so I was going to go into state education, and I went to Bristol, left Cambridge there, went to Bristol, there's a pattern here. Left Cambridge because a guy called Mark Wainwright, this is another John McFarlane story. I was not that far off the blue, but there's a guy called Mark Wainwright from Queens, who again was much better than me. And I remember we went for a beer in June, before we, at the end of our third year, we were exactly the same. We were complete contemporaries. I said, you coming back? He said, yeah, I think so. I said, right, well, I'll go to Bristol then, because you'll get a blue, not me. And I was chasing a girl and stuff. So Bristol seemed like a good sliding door. And I met Bob Reeves, who ran this brilliant course for teachers, which I loved, where you basically, in a load of modules, you've got coaching certificates in different sports. So you did your FA prelim badge, you did your RFU level 1, you did a hockey one, you did athletics, basically to train people to go into schools who weren't PE teachers or specialists to help out. And I just thought, that's what I want to do. I want to coach. I could be good at that. I'm never going to be brilliant as a player, but I could be much, much better as a coach because I understand the game and I'm interested in it. I find it endlessly fascinating. And so when I went to London, get my first job, and then joined Saracens because they were literally up the road, my playing career took off a little bit. But I was always going to coach, and I coached my first rep team at 25, coached Eastern Counties Colts with some good people. Eric Peters was in that team, went on to play for Bath and Scotland. Jan Bonney was in that team, who ended up at Wasps or London Irish, and a good side, really good side. I sort of went from there, really. And then I never thought it would be my career, because it wasn't a career. And I had a plan, didn't come to anything, but like lots of plans, it got sort of diverted. My plan was, I remember when I left university, I said, I'm going to be a head teacher by the time and have done it by the time I'm 40. And then I'm going to go into politics. That was the plan, right? And it was all going quite to plan till I got about 31, 32. And I started applying for high school headships, and I basically had glass ceiling of age. I was seen as too young, and I got very frustrated. And my boss at the time was the best manager I've ever come across in any corporate, sporting, educational field. He was the best I've ever worked with. If he'd gone into the business world, he'd have made a fortune. He was outstanding. He's still alive. We're still in touch. intermittently. He came to me very astute. He said, look, you're getting frustrated. Tell you what, why don't you take that head coach's job at Saracens you keep turning down because you're going to be ahead, and stay with me for another 3 years and I'll pay you some more money. And I thought, that sounds like a good idea. So I stopped applying. He said, but then you'll be 35 and that's the age where you'll get it straight away. Ridiculous. It's not like that now, but it was like that then. And I said, all right. So I took the head job, coach job at Saracens. And whilst I was finishing my 3rd year, the game went pro. And that was that. And I remember I remember Nigel Ray, or Mike Smith, it probably was, who was the CEO. And I said, can I look at the numbers? Can I look at the business plan? Strange coach, this bloke Evans. Why does I want to look at the business plan for? Why doesn't he ask us what the squad's going to be, or what the budget? Can I see the business plan? So then, fair play, they showed me the business plan, and I looked at it, I thought, and I went home to my wife, I said, this hasn't got a prayer. I said, this is within 3 years. Absolutely no question. There's no revenues. And Nigel had agreed to put a certain amount of money in, and I was in that first meeting. And I said, I don't know. And they just signed Michael Liner and Philippe Seller. And I said to my wife, well, you know what? This hasn't got a prayer, but it's going to be great fun. And I'm only 35. And yeah, why not? Give it a crack. And that was that.
Yeah, and what an amazing team they were then as well.
Yeah.
Oh, wonderful team. I mean, I still in touch with quite a number of that team, people like Kieran and Richard Hill and Tony Jitpros and some of the guys bump into Philippe every now and again. I see Michael quite a lot when he's overseeing his lad playing for Queensland Reds and Australia and stuff. Yeah, great team. We still say we blew it. We should have been a dynasty team. That team nearly won the double in 98, won the cup, smashed Wasps in the final, absolutely buried them, 48, not many. And that was after, for me, people like me and people who come up through the amateur Saracens days, that was one of the great, Wasps had kicked our ass and had so much more money than we had for decades. So to absolutely drill them, I mean, it was us and daylight that day. And that was very satisfying. But then it all fell apart, and it fell apart pretty quickly, and it wasn't pleasant. And I left.
Yeah.
I didn't go. I didn't have a job to go to. Your intro was very kind, but inaccurate. I didn't have a job to go to.
Yeah.
I resigned and picked up the Queen's job a couple of months later. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't the only club, I think, at that time that was struggling, because you had the whole Richmond and London Scottish.
Richmond had gone bust.
Yeah.
Or going bust, or gone by London Scottish. Everyone forgets Wakefield actually went out of existence.
Wow. I didn't.
They don't have a rugby league. I mean, that was a club that pproduced people like Mickey Harrison and the fullback up, whose name I forget, played for. This is all ancient history, I know. And, but Wakefield disappeared. Orrell went bust. Waterloo went bust. These were in the northern market, where it wasn't a spectator sport. And that was the thing about English rugby in those days. It was a spectator sport in the West, and that's, you look around the clubs that went into professionalism with a ground, with an actual asset. They were nearly all in Midlands or the West Country. The Northern and the London clubs just played. It was a participation game. If you got, I'll never forget the first time we played, I was in the first Saracens team that played Harlequins down at the Stoop. And we were very excited because they'd never deigned to give us a fixture until night. I'd still take the piss out of Malcolm Wall, one of my chairmen at Queen's, who was playing that day and has had a stratospheric business career. It was the first time they gave us a fixture. It was very kind of them, patronising gits. I don't know. I say that now. They're my club. They're the Harlequins are where my heart is. There must have been 300 people there. Tops. And they didn't want a crowd. Why do you want a crowd? We've got no costs. In fact, this is one of my favourite stories about the club I now love, that I used to hate and despise, and they were everything I hated about the snobbery of the English game. They epitomised it. You had to, until 1988, you were to apply to be a member and be seconded. It was
Of
like fucking,
Harlequins.
yeah, it was like a golf club.
Really?
Seriously, that's true. You can go and look that up in the archives. It's true.
That's
Wow.
crazy. I didn't
Yeah.
actually know that.
Mm.
Wow.
Why? You didn't want a crowd. What do you want a crowd for? We haven't got a ground. You know,
Yeah.
you think about Ross at Repton Avenue, Saracens at Bramley Road, London Irish at the Avenue. There might have been I don't know, 30-meter stand with 15 rows, maybe might hold 500 people if you're lucky.
Yeah.
Why was that? Well, because it was a participation game. It was a game you
Mm.
played. It wasn't a game you watched at club level in certain regions. And when the
Yeah.
game went pro, the northern clubs in particular just could not do it. And even some clubs then were badly managed, like Moseley, were a big club. But at the time, pro rugby came at a time when, and clubs used to in those days, go up and up and down, partly about who they had in their area and sort of leadership captains and all the rest of it. But Moseley were going to Moseley and Coventry being the strongest club in England in the 60s and 70s, along with Bristol. They were the two biggest clubs, big grounds, big crowds for the time. But pro rugby came at a time when a few of the clubs that had been very strong were on one of their downward bits. And of course, that's just timing, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's just timing. You know, Northampton were on their knees, but they got a bunch of guys together, the group of 7, just as before the game went pro. So Northampton were on and up, and they got swept along with it. Part of it was just luck, just pure luck.
Yeah. Yeah. It was like the Wild West in those days. I
It
think,
was.
you know.
We didn't know what we're doing. Some would argue we still don't, but
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
didn't argue with that. Didn't know then.
You know, we had Russell Earnshaw on the show, and he was talking about Bath in the early days, and like we were shocked, Fitzy. You know, we used to look up to them, and we were shocked by some of the stories we were hearing about them.
But
Mark,
even
sorry,
Moo. I was going to say, but even you know, we look back and we didn't know what we didn't know. We were only pups at the time, but nothing changed as far as we could see from the season before when we hadn't got paid to the season after we had. I mean, it changed a little bit for players in terms of parameters, but in terms of the business, it was the same lads opening the avenue up and taking car parking money. It was the same bar stewards. There was no other revenue streams put into it, but the costs all went through the roof. It was crazy.
Yeah, well, I can remember sitting around a board meeting in about 1999, 2000, and Tom Walkinshaw, who was a force of nature, frankly. And if you wanted a man to negotiate for your life, Tom was your guy. And I remember him looking around. Nigel didn't used to like going to those things, so I used to have to go and represent Saracens. And he said, right, guys, so if I can do a deal where we all get £1 million out of broadcast per club, we're all fine, right? Yes. And I will never forget this. Everybody, from Keith Barwell to who had been at Bath at the time, Andrew Brown saw that everyone went, yeah, get us £1 million and we're fine. Yeah. There we go then.
So, I mean, they're crazy times. So, I mean, Mark, going back to your, you probably answered the question, but I mean, what do you think was in your DNA that made you want to, or made you exceed as a leader, either as a coach or as CEO? Was that your education or your childhood or just the people who you met and influenced you?
I think probably my child. I suppose I was brought up by a Welsh father and a Scottish mother from the tough side of Glasgow. And it was drilled into me from a very, very young age that A, education was incredibly important, and B, you want to win, or be successful or whatever it might be. So the idea was, I didn't come from I certainly didn't. I mean, I came from a background where we were not poor. We were comfortably off, but one generation back, we were poor. My mother and my father both brought up in quite limited circumstances. And yet I had this I got given this kind of thing that I then later saw boys and girls who went to very, very established private schools. This kind of very sort of confident, yeah, I can do that. Yeah, I'll give that a go. This sort of real thing. I think it came from my parents, really, which was you can do, not you can do anything, because we didn't come from that base of knowledge, but really sort of, yeah, give it a go, work hard, do well at school, aim high, go for, none of my family had gone to university, mind Oxbridge, and we were socially mobile, my dad did well and stuff in the post office and what have you. And that's, I think, where it came from. So that was just, if it wasn't going to be sport, it was going to be finance, or it was going to be education, or it was going to be something. And I was just assumed, and I don't know where it came from, that I'd do okay and I'd be decent at it. So when you're like that, you tend to end up going, and I always loved team stuff and group stuff. I wasn't very into individual sports at all. Didn't really enjoy it very much. Still don't play golf, just liked cricket. And in Cardiff, we played something we call baseball, which is softball. Back in the day, don't do it much now, but we played that in the summer, and then we played rugby and football in the winter. And I just like team sports and teams and groups. And we were a Catholic family, so there was that congregational thing about going to church. I mean, people say, where you're from? I said, I'm a St. Peter's boy. I went to St. Peter's school. I went to St. Peter's church. I joined St. Peter's Rugby Club.
Yeah.
That's me. I'm a St. Peter's boy from Roath in Cardiff.
And you still got a bit of that Cardiff twang there, Mark, when you say Cardiff, by the way.
I do. It's I've got about 3 words where
Cardiff.
My brother's still got a really strong Cardiff accent. Well, not really strong, but he's not Frank Hennessy, but you can tell where he's from. I've sort of lost it along the way, I suppose, largely. I go back and I mimic a bit, which is pathetic, but I can't help it.
Fair enough.
So let's go back there. After you left or resigned from Saracens, you went on to Harlequins, and those are heady times. You're rebuilding the stadium, building academies, setting culture. What's your philosophy on building teams?
Get the right people. I'll have a clear set of priorities. Don't be a mile wide and an inch deep. What the next 2-3 years, what we're gonna. I'm not a great one for strategic plans and 3-year plans and 5-year plans. They all sound a little bit like the China in the 1970s to me. But I am a very strong thing about what's our focus. What are our priorities in the next period? Oh, and don't micromanage. If you're the leader or the guy in charge or the person in charge, I think they'd be my 3 things. Spend a lot of time. The guy I've already mentioned, who was my boss, the number of times he interviewed for posts and didn't appoint, and I learned a lot from that. He said, no, I'm not confident in that lot. We're going to run that again. And you're thinking, oh, mate, another 2 months ahead of whatever it is. He goes, yeah. I said, David, why you do this all the time? What, because I was sitting on the panels and whatever. He said, Mark, I'll never forget this. He said, Mark, you make a mistake in education and appoint the wrong person. And he said, we all have. You've got to keep them to a minimum. You get the devil's own job getting rid of them. And they do a lot of damage. He said, and I never forgot that. Never forget that. Don't appoint people. You don't take a punt. And the higher up you're going appointing, you can't be certain. We all make mistakes. We've all made appointments that don't turn out well. Give it every chance. I think that's important. Priorities we talked about. I remember listening to Steve Hansen once saying something like, and then this was about coaching. That's it's got similar. And he said it's really important to decide what you're going to focus. What are the things you can do to improve, and spend 90% of your time on that? Really, I mean, people here and other places laugh and say, "Don't talk to Mark about certain things. He's not interested." And they're right. They're absolutely. Don't talk to me about merchandising. I don't care. Don't understand it. Bores me rigid. I'll get someone in who knows what they're talking about. Just get on with it. Make more money. I don't get it. I'm not interested, bores me. And I don't think, and it's a low margin part of the business, and it's very, very hard to move the dial unless you're a big league. And I've never run a big league. So, it just, you look at the numbers and you go, this is not going to move the dial very far. I'm not going to spend much time on it.
Yeah.
And that's not where I'm going to put a lot of my resource. So it becomes a bit of a standing joke, I think. And people go, I don't talk to Mark about that. He's not interested in that. And at the same time, he'll do anything. Don't do anything in ticketing until I run it past Mark, because he's interested in that. And he'll spend a lot of time on that because it's a much bigger revenue stream. That just seems common sense to me. So, but get your priorities and don't micromanage. Those three, I think, probably, if you're going to build. And people talk about culture, and that's really just about treating people. I think it's about treating people the right way and treating them fairly and firmly at times, but fairly, and being to know people as individuals, really.
Absolutely. I mean, you made a really good point earlier about hiring the wrong people, and if you get that wrong, how much that actually costs companies.
Kills you. Absolutely.
I mean, like I was looking at the legal profession, and the cost of a bad hire, even just for an associate, is probably about £90,000 just at that level. And it's very important to get the hiring right. Sometimes I think in this day and age, perhaps they've gone too conservative, and at some point you've got to like jump over the barrier, so to speak, and make that decision. I think
you look at it from a rugby point of view or a sports point of view, rugby league, rugby union, whatever. I worked in netball and whatever. Done a bit of work in cricket, and and even at the basic playing level, recruitment is so important, important.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I'm still of the view that I don't think I've never quite understood why we ask. Coaching a team and recruitment are two quite different skill sets. And I think, particularly in a European season where there's so many games, to ask one person to cover the whole of that, look after, here's your job. You've got to win games. You've got to look after 45 people. You've got to decide who you've got to negotiate their salaries. You've got to decide whether you're going to renew them or not. You've got to find the replacements. You've got to compete against other people who want them. You've got to not overpay. And you're asking one guy to do all this. That's complete madness.
Yeah, absolutely.
Complete and utter madness. And yet, there's any number of teams that still, largely for cost reasons, try and do that model. And it's never made any sense to me. And I know some people who are, again, you learn as you go along. I'll give you an example of somebody I appointed. Dean Richards was a wonderful recruiter. And I think he must have spent, I never asked him, but he appeared to spend 65% of his time on it. Yeah. He never coached in the commonly accepted sense. He did coach, but he didn't coach on the training park, as it were. He's a wonderful selector. That's a different skill. Coaching and selecting are not the same thing.
What shaped you the most in terms of your leadership? Sorry, was it like, are you looking at individual talent?
Let me give you an exactly opposite example from who does the same job. And then at Melbourne Storm, I worked with one of the great coaching legends of Australian rugby, Craig Bellamy, whose unbelievable record. Was it 11 prelim finals in 12 years in a league that sets out to try and stop teams being dominant? He's just extraordinary. When I got there in 2013, Craig didn't even know what the players were played. Didn't want to know. Couldn't get him in at the beginning. Couldn't get him into a recruitment and retention meeting. Your people is quite important, mate. No, I don't do that. So those two people, it's on a continuum, isn't it? And you've got to know what you're recruiting and what you're trying to look at. And one guy who did the job entirely without coaching, technical coaching at all, to the point that for for weeks he wouldn't even watch training. He didn't think it was a good use of his time, right? And then you've got to manage that. And that's, some of the players found that very strange, right? And then Craig wouldn't miss a training, would rather cut off his foot than miss a training session, and he ran most of them, right? And as he's been Melbourne Storm head coach now, I think, for over nearly 25 years. I mean, he does a bit less than he used to. But in my time, halfway through, he was still running virtually every session. There's any number of ways to do it. And so my point is that you can't do it all. There's no right or wrong way of doing it. What you do have to do as the bloke above them is recognize the style and then a point around it. And you wonder sometimes why, and I've never done this, I don't like it, but I do understand why they do it. Quite a number of coaches travel with an entourage, as it were. In other words, they so you look at football, you look at American football, and some rugby too as well, they bring the same people with them. So they'll bring their S&C guy, they'll bring their physio, they'll bring their partly it's trust, because it's a very febrile business. Partly it's trust. Partly, however, it's about fit, and they know what they need for them to operate. It's brilliant, and I don't know if it's true, but I really hope it is. And I've been told it by 3 different sources, so I think it's reasonably well sourced. Alex Ferguson, one of the great leaders. I've got friends in football who were in there say, couldn't coach a lick. That's why he kept training as assistant manager all the time. He freshened it up because he wasn't going anywhere. So otherwise it becomes repetitive. So he freshened it up. And the assistant manager, the Brian Kidds, etc., they did most of the on-field coaching. And once I've had the story is apparently Brian Kidd had to go away for a couple of weeks on something, can't remember what it was. Must have been a family thing or something important. And Fergie took the training session. He didn't get past the warm-up. The boys were just laughing, falling over themselves. And he just lost his temper and said, well, fuck the lot of you. Now, I don't know if that's true, right? That may be apocryphal, but I love it as a story to illustrate how the same role with the same title can be done in myriad different ways, and none of them's right and none of them is wrong. We talk a lot about cultural fit. When you're appointing a coach, and I've appointed a few or been involved in appointing a few, cultural fit's really important. In other words, what are we looking for now? And what we're looking for now might not be the same as what we were looking for 5 years ago or what we were looking for in 5 years' time. Are you clear? It's a bit like my point about priorities. Are you clear about what you're after? So for example, if I was ever appointing an international coach, which I've never had the opportunity to do, I'd be going, is he a good selector? Number one, because international rugby is largely, not entirely by any means, of course, but it's far more weighted to selection than it is to technical coaching. You don't have them long enough. You boys played rep footy and all the rest of it. How much coaching did you actually get in rep teams? I'm going to argue hardly any. Organizational, sure. Yeah, but actual player improvement, player development, skill development, please. It always makes me laugh when you look at a Lions paw, that huge coaching team, and I'm thinking, what are they all doing? They've only got 8 weeks. Yeah. Seriously, I mean, I don't get it. I've never been on one. Maybe I'm missing a trick. I don't know. But it's. Do you know what you're trying to recruit and what's right for your club at this stage? Are you looking for a real hands-on coaching guy? Are you a club team? Are you a rep team? Are you an international team? Keeps coming back to, and people talk about. Is it about individual talent? Is it about culture? And the answer, of course, is about both. And picking a coach is a bit like that. It's the right balance for the particular team you've got. Is your team full of rock stars and you've got a surfeit of talent, and actually the main job is keeping them all together on the same page? Or is this job about making bricks with straw? In other words, are you looking for somebody who's got a track record and an understanding of putting together game plans and tactics and building culture that allows a team for a while to overachieve its intrinsic ability. They're two very, very different situations, and you should recruit into the situation that you've got, is my argument.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you've answered the second question, which is how you get the balance right in a team between individual talent and collective culture. You've
Yeah, that's
answered
a
that.
paradox, isn't it? That's a paradox. That's a trick. People go, "Oh, you got to treat everybody the same." No, you haven't. That's nonsense. I mean, if anyone believes that, they're a fool. You do not treat the 18-year-old rookie just coming out of the academy as you treat a 35-year-old 100-cap international. And anybody who thinks you do is an idiot. So, but at the same time, and here's the paradox, you've got to be able to do both. You got to treat people as an individual, never mind the talent bit. You've got to treat people as individuals and make them feel that you care. But at the same time, there are certain collective commitments that aren't negotiable. Now, those two things are not, it's a paradox, but you can do both. You've got to do both. You know, if everything is, this is the way we do it here, and there are no exceptions and there are no excuses, and this is completely non-negotiable, that ain't going to last very long. You might get a sugar hit, and you might get 1 year of it where everything comes together. That's great, but it's not sustainable. It's just too inflexible. And at the other end, you know, yeah, guys, jouer, do what you like. You know, never mind about any of the other stuff. You know, any of the sort of disciplines around the team and and all the other things that you might consider. No, we're not bothering about that. Just go out and play. That ain't going to work either.
Yeah.
So you've got to somehow come, and again, people do it differently, but you've got to come to some kind of balance whereby you can do both of those things. There is a technical term for it, which I've never been big on, but I understand what they're saying is that individual talent needs a structure and needs a platform to perform. Right. So in team games, that's part of the trick. Or the task, can we, and we have a real issue here with the Drua because we're operating within a very unusual culture. And so that balance between the team norms and the individual behaviors is a real challenge.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's one of the things that's made the thing so interesting.
Yeah.
So you've obviously worked with a lot of different players in a lot of different organisations, and you just touched upon the Drua and amongst other organisations you've worked with. What do you describe elite performance? What does it look like for you when you come into a new environment? What are you looking for or to implement?
Well, I try not to go in with any preconceptions. Is the first thing, and. I think usually we go back to the point you made or point you asked about building teams. It's very hard in a team sport to get consistent elite performance without building a coherent team of staff and alignment. Alignment, alignment, I think, is a much underused concept, and I'd come out of the team now to illustrate this a little bit and talk about unions and larger organisations around a sport, be it the ECB or the FA or Premier League or ourselves, Super Rugby or whatever it might be. And if you're trying to build a sport in a country, and we tend to organise along country lines. Alignment is absolutely key. And people say, well, why is it in certain countries they seem to overachieve given their resources? Why is it in certain countries with the resources they got, their performance is not what you would possibly expect? And I would argue that for 75% of the time, it's about alignment. The unions that are well aligned, by which I mean that the different stakeholders, I don't like that phrase very much, but it seems to be, everybody uses it now. All the different elements that have an interest in the sport, from the clubs to the players, to the union, to the supporters, to the media, etc., are largely aligned. In other words, they're all trying to contribute to a common set of goals and targets. And it's never perfect because there are conflicts of interest and people are by definition protective of their own area and want to promote it. But you've got to try and find a way whereby the governance, and this is linked, where the governance of sport minimizes those conflicts and aligns as many of the participants as possible. So if you're going to ask me, for example, why is it that, think of an overachiever, think of Ireland, okay, whereby, and partly it's luck, you can't go out and recreate the private school system of Dublin in a poor country, for example. Just can't do it. So don't bother trying. But even with certain advantages or disadvantages, which are nothing to do with the sport, Ireland have overachieved. They have gone from being and also ran in World Rugby for decades, to a powerful force in the game on the back of 6 million people when it's probably the third or fourth sport in the country. That is quite a remarkable achievement, matched probably only historically by Australia, where, again, out of 30 million people, but a sport that really doesn't touch the top 10. And yet they won the World Cup twice. They've been to two other World Cup finals. They've won Super Rugby. They've won the Rugby Championship. And I know they've been through a very, very challenging time in recent years. But nevertheless, how the hell do they do that off such a small player base? Well, and they will smile, because when you're in the union, you never think you're aligned. If you're outside it and you're looking from the outside, you can see that actually, despite all the disputes, there is a degree of alignment that explains why they are doing. I mean, look at France, for years and years and years, underachieved, for, the biggest rugby country in the world by a distance. There's not another country in the world that has the number of people in the country who nominate rugby union as their number one sport. No one else gets close. I think they're twice as big as I think England, being maybe the second, of a similar population. But for years they were terrible. I mean, given their advantages, absolutely shocking outcomes. Not now. Why not? Well, because although their alignment is not perfect, it's a damn sight better than it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
They finally got sick of their performance, and they still have never won a World Cup. And that is the holy grail. But they've got the biggest league in the world. They're always in the top four. They have got the biggest TV contract. They've actually finally stopped fighting between the union, largely, not entirely. It's France. It'll never be zero. They've largely aligned, to the point that, we will always take a reduced team down to in July, because the club competition is really important. Okay, we're all agreed about that. It doesn't really matter whether it's right or wrong. Everybody agrees that when nobody fights about it anymore, they get criticised when they go to New Zealand. Oh, it's an insult, blah, blah, blah. They don't care. Now, this works for us. We're trying to be the best version of ourselves. We probably got too many teams. Our season is probably too long, but we can't shift that. We've got to stop fighting about it and find another way around it. That's alignment. And once they did that and started to put more focus on their age group and realized that actually in a country where they don't play rugby at school, you've got to put more resources into that late teenage group, which they never used to do. So you look at French players, they used to be very late developers. They rarely broke onto the scene very early. That's all changed. It's just alignment. I say it's just alignment as if it's easy to do. It's not. It's incredibly difficult. But if you don't do it, look at my country, there's no alignment at all. And there hasn't been for a long, long time. And then people wonder why this thing in Wales is not of recent making. This has been 25 to 30 years in the making.
I just want to pick up on one thing you said there. I mean, and rightly so, you're going into a new environment, not having any preconceptions, whether it's the Drua or the Rebels or Harlequins or whatever. What are your top actions when you do go into an environment to get a good picture of what's right, what you need to keep going with, what you need to change? What is your thought process there?
Well, I appear to get jobs where things need fixing. And it's either the business is suboptimal. That's a nice neutral word, isn't it? So either the business is really struggling or the team is really struggling, or in some cases, both. So one day I'm going to get offered a job where they'll say, Mark, everything's going pretty well. Can you just come in and sort of, just look after it? But it hasn't happened yet. So to a degree, just you know what the priorities are before you take the job. If you've done any kind of due diligence and you've read the numbers and you've looked at the history, take Harlequins as an example, which I took over in 2000. The team was terrible. The crowd was non-existent. The stadium was pitiful and the business was dreadful. Apart from that, it was going really well. So that was interesting in the sense that you effectively had to rebuild the whole organization. And people go, oh, well, you got relegated 5 years in. And we go, yeah, well, we knew that was a risk. We knew that was a risk from day one. It was a conscious decision that in order to do other things, particularly two other things, build the stadium, because on the stadium we had, we could never be a force. We were competing against Leicester Tigers with Welford Road, even pre-development of 15, 16, 17,000. And we had a stand holding 4,000, a bunch of golf seats. It didn't matter because we only had a crowd of less than 2,000 and less than 1,000 season ticket holders. But the point was there, right, we've got to get a facility up. And to get a facility up, the owners who were brilliant, still there, so I said, look, we're pumping in a lot of money to keep us afloat. We really don't want to finance the build as well. So my job was to get the club into some kind of financial shape that we could borrow so that we could actually get a loan. We were a good enough risk. And there was only one way. It took me 5 years. It was only one way you could do that. That was to keep your playing costs reasonably tight. And I remember in the first 3 months I was there saying to the owners, look, you do understand. I understand that's fine. It's absolutely fine. But you do understand that in this league, we might go down because with the budget we've got, we may overachieve 1 year or 2 years, but we won't overachieve for 5. There'll be a year that, it's going to get tight. Are you okay with that? They said, yeah, we're fine. And the only irritating thing is that it was year 5 because we got the loan. We were building the stand. You look at the pictures, we were building this new stand. We'd sort of got nearly to break even and we bloody got relegated that year when any one of 6 could have gone down. It was just frustrating in anything. It wasn't. We always knew it was a risk. And we missed a kick in front of the sticks with 2 minutes to go. And that's the way it goes. That's sport. You can't let yourself was that a failure? Not really, I didn't think. It was incredibly irritating, disappointing, and you wish it hadn't happened because it put us back 18 months. But it didn't change anything. We kept doing the same stuff we were going to do anyway because now we knew we had a facility and the other one was the academy. We'd never produced Harlequins had never produced any homegrown players. So we were constantly trying to put a team together with no bottom end of value because we weren't generating that. And it was ridiculous because we were sitting on this massively huge rugby market of players, of juniors and age groups and minis, and didn't do anything with it. So, but both of those things cost money. And where'd you take it from? You got to take it from playing. But if you don't do that, you'll never be anything. And you look at them now, they're the highest revenue club in the league. Turnover, they make more money than any other club in the English Premiership. And you look back 25 years, less than 1,000 season ticket holders, attendance less than 2,000. It's like Leinster. I remember playing Leinster, 2 men and a dog.
Yeah.
You can move things if you've got the market. I was going to say there are certain cities and certain areas where I just think don't bother. There's just not enough interest. But in other areas, there is, if you get it right and you come back to what we said earlier. What's your priorities? What do you spend most of the time on? Where do you put what limited money you've got? What's your vision about where you're trying to get to? Doesn't mean you will get there, but at least everyone knows where you're trying to get to. I mean, we used to sit around in Queens in the early part of the decade, of the noughties, and go, geez, I wonder how many could we get if we had a decent team. And we weren't being critical of the people. We had some wonderful players, but we knew, Ed Will Greenwood and Keith Wood and Jason Leonard and David Wilson and Andre Voss, because, we had a budget. It was just one of the lower budgets, that was all. We knew we didn't have a squad that could win a premiership. And we knew that. We won a couple of cups. We won the Challenge Cup twice. We got the final of the English Cup thing. We came 6th one year. That was our highest. And then we had a bad year, had a load of injuries, made a couple of bad signings, and we went down in a year when last game, it was a great best day. You look back, best day of the league, one of these ever had. 6 clubs could have gone down on the last afternoon. It was a proper round the grounds thing. But I don't think we got the strategy wrong. I don't. No. And the Queens fans hated me saying that, because I said it at the time. I said, I wouldn't do it different. I don't think we had a choice. And you can move it, but it takes a long time. I was there 11 years. It took a long, long time. And then in the 12th year, we won a premiership. Should have stayed around one more year, shouldn't I?
Yeah, yeah.
But you must be very
talking
proud.
about...
Sorry, mate.
I love the club. Rob, we talked about it earlier. That it's ironic, really, because they represented everything I didn't like about English rugby when I, with a rather chip on my shoulder, came up from South Wales. And if you told me then I'd end up being in love with the place, I'd have gone, you're having a laugh, Now, great owners. And I kept trying to find all these sort of, stuck up upper middle class oiks. I just couldn't find them. It was desperately disappointing.
Yeah, because some of the lads from London Irish went down there, joined Harlequins, and then all the Harlequins joined London Irish. So that was
it was all a bit Dick Best and all that and that.
Yeah.
But it's about, you keep coming back to, you got to be clear about what's the priorities and why they're the priorities and what you're trying to build. And it is different in different places. Melbourne, it was a wonderful team. I didn't touch the team. The business was screwed.
Yeah.
It was a wonderful, wonderful team, isn't it? They'd already won, I don't know how many grand finals, and they've carried on. You didn't need to worry about the team. So I spent virtually no time on the team. And what they'd done about rugby league anyway? The answer is a lot by the end. But at the beginning, I wasn't going to walk in and tell Craig Bellamy what he should do. The man's a legend. I mean, you'd be a fool. But there were one or two things needed fixing on the playing side, but that didn't take very long, or not fixing, just refining more than fixing. But it was the business. That was a business turnaround. We were losing way too much money, and we couldn't carry on with that. That's how we got the club in the first place. News Corporation, Rupert Murdoch's mob, gave up on it and said, we can't make this work. It's cost us $80 million so far. Will you take it? So we said, all right, we'll have a go. So that's completely different. That's a completely different. That's a completely different job.
Yeah, I mean, you made a very important point. You're like about elite performance as a leader, because normally people come on and say elite performance about an individual, but you're talking about elite performance as a leader, which is aligning everyone.
Elite performance comes down the whole organisation. It's not about it's a multifaceted thing. And it's about the group and it's about the individual. It's about the on-field and the off-field. It's a multi-headed concept, and I try not to use it very much. I think it's become a bit of a buzz phrase. Oh, I'm into elite performers. Well, what's that mean? It means you want to win, isn't it? Isn't that what it is? I mean, you want to win. Yeah, well, we can all buy into that. We want to win. It's a lot better than the alternative. Actually, I mean, to be without being and I can be, I know, sort of slightly tongue in cheek. I would say we want to improve. my big thing is always
Improvement.
given the resources we've got and given where we're coming from, are we better now than we were 2, 3, 4 years ago? And if we can I'm sounding dangerously like a coach and talking about controlling the process, which is another hackneyed phrase, but true. Are we better now than we were? And if we've got more resources, we should be better. So are we better than that? If you see what I mean. And in other words, are we, for what we've got, it's all very well to say, well, you know what? Well, we've just won the league. I've seen really poor organizations win leagues because they've just had so many resources. Well, you should win the league. I mean, take Premiership football. How people go, okay, yeah, Leicester City. And I go, yeah, Black Swan, mate. It'll happen once in 100 years. Okay. So let's not waste time talking about that. How do you measure the success of a team like, I don't know, Bournemouth? What's a good result for Bournemouth? Who traditionally are a level 3, level 14, that is a different metric to Manchester United, who should be always in the top 6. And a lot of people would say higher than that. I'd say there are probably 6 teams now, maybe 7 with Newcastle eventually, have got the resources that they could, should, will win a Premiership. So what? Everyone else has failed, have they? That's ridiculous. That's not how you measure it.
Absolutely. And what sort of mindset as a leader do you need to get that alignment? I mean, how do you?
Well, I'm not sure I always do, to be honest. I'm sure there are times in my career where I've manifestly failed to do that.
Yeah.
It's a combination of partly it's intellectual in the sense that, analyze the market you're in, analyze the strengths and weaknesses you've got, some of which you can't change. Right. So, for example, let's take my country again. Let's take Wales. One of my criticisms of a lot of Welsh commentators and participants to a degree is they bang on a lot about things you can't change and that they're not good things, So you can't change the fact that Wales is relatively, in European terms, a very poor country. You can't change the fact that they've only got one FTSE 500 company in the whole nation. You can't change the fact that it's right next to a market that is nearly 20 times as big and that you can live in Wales and play in that market with ease. You can't change that. There's a whole load of stuff that you can't change. So stop talking about it because you can't change it. Why can't we have a conversation about and stop wishing it was so? And why can't we do this? Why can't we buy the Irish? Well, because we haven't got a private school. We've only got 3 private schools in the country and none of them have more than 350 kids and half of them are girls. That's why. Can we move on now? Because I'm sick of talking about it because it can't be replicated. Right? Well, why can't we get more sponsorship? Well, because we don't actually have many corporate headquarters in Wales. Admiral is the only FTSE 500 company based in the country. Well, we don't have a national air carrier. We don't have a national drink. We don't have a national bank. All your classic supporters, corporate supporters that other countries rely on. Yeah, well, that's just the way it is. So let's concentrate on what we have got and try and build a system around that and be blunt to the fans and open about why some of the other models won't work instead of pretending that they could. It strikes me as, I don't know what the right word is. It strikes me, well, it's certainly opaque. Let's put it that way. It's not at all transparent. I've always believed that if you're upfront with the fan base and tell them as it is, they understand it better. Doesn't mean you're not going to get slaughtered anyway, but at least they're slaughtering you from a more informed perspective.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's all about controlling what you can.
It is, and it's a bit like here. We've got massive disadvantages, but we've got some really good strengths too. So yeah, if you could do something about the disadvantages, do it. Right? If you can mitigate. But some of them you just can't, and you're wasting your time and your energy and your resources trying to. So, and put the money where it will have more. We keep coming back to this. Where can you have the most impact? Where's it? It's like the Quins thing again. The impact was not to pour money into the team because it wasn't sustainable. eventually your owner's going to get investor fatigue, right? Or they're going to die and you won't be able to replace them, right? And then where are you? Well, you're bust probably.
Yeah.
You know, it's Worcester, you know. Once
Absolutely agree.
Duckworth went, the stability just went.
Yeah.
Oh, you could argue that they didn't do the right things during the times when they had a very supportive and committed, emotionally committed owner. I don't know. I don't know. I wasn't close enough to it, all the rest of it. All I do know is if all you do with a windfall of resources is stick it in the team, unless you've got the other things already taken care of, it's a sugar hit. It's a real short-term fix because that is just not sustainable in the long run. And when I say the long run, sports teams have been around a long time,
Yeah.
Harlequins are 130, whatever, I don't know, 100. No, they're much older than that. I'm talking about Harlequins are 160 years old or something.
Yeah.
You've got to think in those type of time frames. You're just a custodian at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah. It's all about investing in the infrastructure as well.
Well, it's investing in whatever you need in your market it's a circle, isn't it? To improve what we want to improve. We want to be better. However you want to manage that. We want to want to be more financially resilient, or we want to be a better team, or we want to have better better facilities, or whatever it might be. That's the easy bit. What do you want? We want a big ground with a big crowd and a great training thing, and we want to win trophies, and we want to be profitable. Yeah? Well, how many of those things are you at the moment? None. Right, well, which one's first then? Is the question I would always ask. So, yes, you've just described your outcomes, your desired outcomes. You've got none of them, so you've got to prioritize now. Explain to me the sequence of the improvement and what that is based upon. So, is it putting more money into pathways and player development, or is it building a new training centre? Because you can't do both. Make your mind up and explain why you think this one's more important.
Absolutely.
That's not that complicated, is it?
No.
It really isn't.
No, it's very interesting
Absolutely.
points you make there, Mark. I mean, it's and the Wales example with only having one FTSE 500 company makes perfect sense. You're really saying control the controllables. There's no point in putting effort into things that you can't change. Makes perfect sense. Have some creative thinking, because it's not one size fits all with their market you go into. So going to Fiji is going to, the challenges and problems and opportunities are going to look very different to Melbourne, to London, to
Absolutely
wherever. Great points. I want to come back to the period of time with Harlequins and ask a sort of more personal question. Obviously, you had your plan, and within the period of time, and even at the time, as you said there, it was a risk, which happened in that 5-year period on that 5th year. But it happened. You, I'm sure, took a lot of flack, probably from outside of the organisation, press, fans, etc., etc. How did you deal with that personal pressure as the CEO? What stratagems did you put in place to sort of get you through that external criticism?
Well, I mean, you mean after I'd come out of a dark room for 3 days? Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, look, it's again, by that stage, we had the academy was starting to produce. We had a stadium that could hold now 9,000 instead of seats, and others at the end. And our crowds had gone up by then. So our fan base was much bigger and more engaged. We had to cut some costs. So some people lost their jobs, which was most unfortunate. Some players were let go. But if I'm being honest, we were always going to come straight back. There was absolutely no risk. People talk about, it'll be such a challenge. No, it won't.
Mm-hmm.
No, sorry, it won't. If we're still on I can't remember what the budget still was, but it was still quite significant. Andre Vos was still in the team. Will Greenwood was still in the team. Ugo Monu was still in the team. Andrew Merton's just still joined us. We were going to come straight back up, right? So it was, like I said, it was an 18-month delay. We just carried on. We cut some costs and we carried on. The strategy didn't change. It really didn't. And there was a load of myths around, they went down and found themselves. What a load of bollocks. If you did, anyone who said that, and people did, I said, you don't know us. You have no experience of what's been going on here for the last 5-6 years. You've got absolutely no idea. It's just a glib bit of commentary based on, I just ignored it. I just ignored it. I just thought it was nonsense. I knew it was nonsense. And it gave Dean a year to have a look at them all under no pressure. Because, as he once said to me, my grandmother could coach this lot to promotion, and he was right. He was right.
Yeah.
And we let a few young kids got a lot more game time, and that accelerated their development. And we had a bit of a golden generation. We had a bit of a golden generation coming through. And things like that are just luck, right? We had a golden generation coming through. Mike Brown, Chris Robshaw, Robbo and George Robson. I've left out a few, which is George Lowe. You look at the 2012 Premiership winning team. Pile of them played in the Championship in 2006, and that improved that. They got more game time than they would have got if we'd stayed up. Don't get me wrong, I wish we'd stayed up, right? But to paint it as some kind of year zero, complete change, found your soul, utter nonsense. We did actually just, unfortunately, had to get rid of some people and just to keep the losses under control. But we just carried on. We just carried on doing the same stuff we'd been committed to for the previous 5 years, which had won us a couple of trophies and got us to a final and reduced our losses and grew our crowds and all the rest of it.
So would that be, I mean, look, life, sport, business, it's full of ups and downs. And that was, in terms of getting relegated, I mean, again, the plan, as you're saying there, and you've been proven right over time, has produced and come back up and lots of positives throughout it. But in terms of for going down, would that be your advice to CEOs, business leaders, sports coaches, etc.? Ignore it, stick to your guns, and carry on and work your plan. Fair enough.
So there's a few technical issues with the video of Mark Evans, so we missed the last 6 or 7 minutes. I'm afraid, but there's so much golden information in the video. We just wanted to get it out. We'll finish with the outro in a minute, and we'll be sure to hear from Mark Evans again. Thank you.
Well, Mark, thank you for sharing your journey from player to reformer, from Harlequins to Fiji. Your lessons on leadership, resilience and governance are as valuable in the boardroom as they are in the rugby field. This has been The Business End. Thank you very much for joining us. Been a pleasure.
Thank you, Mark. Been a pleasure speaking with you.